The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Debating Non-Christian Religions. You don't have to applaud, because that's supposed to be silent there. No, it's great. I get asked all the time, why do you focus so much on Christianity? I've watched your show. I've seen your debates. You just seem to only care about Christianity. As a matter of fact, when Christians write in, they'll say, you're just anti-Christian. You would never be brave enough to go after Islam. Well, yes, actually, I would. Not only have I drawn Muhammad, but I've had debates with Muslims on the show when they call in, and I am not nicer to them. I try to be nice to everybody. The goal on the show is for people to get as good as they give on the show. And if we're able to have a productive conversation, as I am with people like Blake Junta, then we get to have that. And if they're calling in to preach, then we probably won't get to have that conversation. It'll probably get shut down. And you'll excuse me, I have a cough this week. But I focus on Christianity in part because it's a call-in show, and most of the people who call in are Christians. That's the way things work. When the Muslims call in, I talk to them. When the Scientologists call in, I talk to them. When the individual called in a couple weeks ago to talk about all of the times that he's been visited by aliens, I talk to him too. And I'm an atheist because I'm a skeptic, because I can only believe things when they've been demonstrated to be reasonably considered true. So I'm an atheist because I'm a skeptic, but that's not why I talk about this stuff. I talk about this stuff because I'm a humanist, because I care about what kind of world we live in, because people's beliefs matter. They have consequences, they affect their actions, and those actions have consequences on all of us because we don't live in a vacuum. The truth is, though, I don't actually focus on Christianity as much as some people might think. And the reason some people think that I focus on Christianity is because somewhere in their head, they're focused on Christianity. Because by and large, when you're having these conversations, many of the arguments that are presented apply to many different religions. And what I'm really presenting on the show, even if it's not always obvious and clear and pointed out, is critical thinking, skepticism, and humanism. I object to the supernatural claims because they haven't met their burden of proof, and that's me acting as a skeptic. And I object to the immoral teachings of religions and the actions they encourage because I'm a humanist. There are rational objections to all religious and supernatural claims. These are derived from skepticism and are attempts to promote and encourage skepticism on the show. But we're not really a skepticism show. We're not really, here's how you do skepticism. I can skeptic better than you. That involves teaching elements much more specifically that aren't as necessarily entertaining as engaging in heated discussions about religions or politics or whatever. But there are a lot of people doing that. And I have to focus on my little area of expertise. And that is telling you what I think, and it's always just what I think, about religions. And it isn't so much religion that I object to or address. I've said before, I am an enemy of religion, but I am a friend to the religious. What I'm objecting to are unfounded and unethical doctrines that are part of religions. You may be able to invent a religion that I might approve of and support and even like. Probably not, because there are aspects of when we categorize something as a religion that I'm still going to find objectionable, this idea of worship and deference to something. But secular humanism has been declared as a religion by the Supreme Court, and while that's troubling, and I know we could have a whole argument about that, if you wanted to say, hey, what's your religion? That's as close as you're going to get from me. So you have the top level distinctions, theism and atheism. These aren't religions. These are the categories under which all of these beliefs about gods fall. And all of the religions and philosophical ideas that involve a god fall under the branch of theism. Theism is contingent upon the belief that there is a god, not contingent upon there actually being a god, which is a distinction worth making. Under atheism, you have all of the things that are not contingent upon there actually being a God or anyone actually believing that a God exists. And so under theism, you might have polytheism, monotheism, henotheism, and other categories that talk about what kind of theism vaguely you're talking about. And under that, you'll have divisions by major religions of Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam. And underneath each of those, you're going to have additional divisions. In Judaism, you might have Reform, Orthodox, Conservative. And under Christianity, you might have the Protestant Catholic divide. And then underneath each one of those, you might have additional divides. So I was raised primarily a Southern Baptist. So to get to my religion, we go theism, monotheism, maybe. Protestantism, or Christianity, Protestantism, Baptist, Southern Baptist, Convention-ish, depending on which one you want to point to. Then you get to First Baptist Church of Harvester, Missouri, and then you have to drill right down to the pew that I was sitting on, because the truth is, there are as many concepts of God as there are people who believe that a God exists. And so my beliefs about God as a teenager sitting in that pew were probably different from my parents and the blue-haired people that sat behind us and the weird person who stumbled in late on the edge, and I'm not even really sure why they were there. Everybody has this different idea about God. Now, you'd think that if you were debating a Southern Baptist or a Presbyterian, you would get perhaps widely different arguments for their doctrines, and yet you don't. Over 1,000 denominations identify as Christian, and yet there doesn't seem to be much variety in the arguments they present. They may disagree on a particular point, and that, oh no, we've split off from you. So if you want to know what's wrong with the First Baptist Church, you ask the Second Baptist Church. And if you want to know what's wrong with them, you can ask the Presbyterians and the Methodists and the Lutherans, etc. And all of them will gang up on the Catholics because they're Mary worshiping, heathens who are corrupt and not actually Christian. But the arguments that are presented, I've debated a lot of theists. I've debated a lot of people who actually believe in Jesus in the same way or a similar way to I did, that he's God incarnate, that it's necessary for salvation and all of this. And yet when we have a debate about whether or not God exists, at no point have any of them really tried to defend the God that they actually believe in. One gentleman actually stood up at the beginning of the debate to say, I'm not here to argue for a vague deistic notion of God, I'm here to argue for Jesus Christ. And then proceeded, as I showed during the debate review, that he never argued for Jesus Christ. He did in fact argue this same vague deistic notion. But in his head, I'm sure he thought he was defending the Jesus of the Bible. If you take a look at arguments like the Kalam cosmological argument, that everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence, the conclusion of that argument is really, therefore, the universe had a cause for its existence. That argument doesn't say anything at all about what that cause is. It doesn't say that this cause is an intelligent agent that is supernatural, that exists outside of space-time. These are all things that get added on in subsequent arguments, and then hopefully they will drill down from must have been a cause to must have been a God to Jesus must be that God. Yahweh must be that God. But the Kalam cosmological argument itself is not specifically Christian. It is not specifically tied to any of the major theistic religions. It is a general, it's not even really a defense of theism. It's the first step towards a defense of theism. It's just saying there must be a cause. If you go on from that to first cause arguments are basically in a similar category. They could apply to Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and a host of other religions. The moral arguments that are often presented, they apply to any and every religion that has as its source of morality a deity. Either morality is derived from the essence of this God thing, or this God dictates what is and isn't moral. But in all cases, the form of the argument of a moral argument would apply to any religion that is saying that morality is derived from God. So it's not specifically tied to Christianity. Teleological arguments and fine-tuning arguments about the world we find ourselves in and how this just couldn't have happened by chance, so there must have been somebody who has a plan and enacted this plan, they tend to apply to all of the theistic religions in some form or another. Now, they're presented in slightly different ways, such that they try to tweak it towards the religion they're talking about. But there's something that's happened on the TV show on several occasions where someone calls in, does not identify what their belief is. And we have 6 lines on the show, and what we try to do is keep at least 3 of them open for theists. So we ask people if you're an atheist or theist, because we'd really like to fill all 6 lines with theists. I love you guys, and I'm happy to talk to you on the show, but the show is popular and beneficial mostly because we talk to theists. Not always. There are some very good conversations that take place in our community about how to come out, when to come out, what's going on in people's lives, how they've lost their connection with their family and other stuff because they've been ostracized because they're the ones who no longer believe. But the bulk of the show is focused on the interactions with theists. On some occasions, somebody will call in and start presenting an argument for why they believe there's a God, and they're trying to lay a trap. Happened just a few weeks ago. Fortunately, I've been doing the show long enough that it's unlikely that I'll fall into this particular trap, but not impossible. They want me to address their argument for the existence of God as if I'm rebutting Christianity when they are in fact a Muslim who has not made this clear. This is going to happen over and over again when you run into people, probably not so much one-on-one, where the conversation might have started from, hey, what do you believe about this? And they say, oh, I'm a Muslim, and then you say, oh, why? But in debates, you're probably going to know what your opponent's beliefs are, but that doesn't mean that in every conversation you're going to know. So this trap has come up more than once, where somebody will argue for the existence of God, and I can tell by the way they're tiptoeing around certain things that they're waiting for me to say something about, the Bible, or specific characteristics attributed to a Christian God, so they can go, aha! See, you're not really an atheist, you just rejected the Christian God, and now you're thinking about it all the time and trying to apply it to all of us, but our God is very, very different. If you're going to be in conversations like that, be aware that that type of thing is likely to happen, and if you make the mistake, you know what? Yep, you were right, I made that mistake. Let's focus on what you're actually saying and defending. I will listen more carefully. I'm more willing to have this conversation now because you've also shown that I was wrong about something. Please show me that I'm wrong about your God. So what about religions that don't really have a God, like Scientology and some versions of Buddhism, probably most versions of Buddhism and others? Well, clearly we're not going to have the sorts of arguments that we talked about before with cosmological arguments. Instead, we're going to have a different category of argument that will apply to many of them as well. In every single case, you need to look at and respond to what is actually being claimed. I can't count the number of times I've seen atheists in debates with people, sometimes prominent atheists in public debates, where they are not responding to what their opponent has said, they are responding to something in their head, or some version of a religion that exists in their head, and so you wind up just talking past each other for a while, and both leave thinking the other one's just a brick wall idiot that we're never going to get through. We're never going to get through to that person because can't they understand that I'm talking about the God of classical theism who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent? Maybe you were talking about that. Maybe that's not exactly what they were talking about. If you're in a conversation with somebody who's a Protestant, and you start mocking things based on Catholic doctrine, they get to write you off. They get to dismiss everything you say. Oh, you believe this cracker literally turns into the body of Jesus, ha ha ha. No, that's not what they believe, and now they know that you don't have the first clue what they believe, so they get to dismiss that. But in those non-theistic religions, hey, karma, cool, what's that? Tell me about that. So you think there's like some kind of cosmic balance that you get as you give? Well, how is this balance maintained? Is there some thinking being that is sitting here going, oh yeah, you got screwed over on that parking spot this week, so I'm going to give you a better one. And oh yes, I know that your family is suffering from this particular thing, but don't worry, we'll make up for it at another time. How does that actually work? Asking those kinds of questions is how you get them to think about what they're actually saying. And the truth is, when you get into things like karma, as soon as these things have been talked about for ages, so you're not presenting anything that other people haven't thought about. Hey, that doesn't make sense that there's like this cosmic balance. And we know from looking at people, there are people who've had terrible lives start to finish. Just, hey, he lived for 8 minutes in misery from birth to death. Terrible. He spent his entire life just wasted away. Look, that woman over there, she's been gifted everything and is rich and wealthy, has never had, she's been happy. How is that a balance? And so they do something that is sort of a post hoc rationalization. They say, you know what? It's not a balance that occurs in this life while you're alive, so there must be some balance that happens after you've died. Well, the only way that can work is if you're in fact reincarnated and you get to, that would be awesome. If you were reincarnated to maybe like higher and lower planes of existence and awareness. Hey, yeah, if you're not very good in this life, you get reincarnated as a cockroach. But if you are, you might get to come back as the leader of a nation. Well, wait a minute. Now you're arguing for something that leads to caste systems, that leads to looking at human being as if you're of lesser value than you are. And then you use your religion, which is wholly unfounded, which you haven't offered any explanation for other than it'd be really nice if there were something like karma. And you've used that as a justification to treat an entire group of people as outcasts. How does that work? Why is that just? Oh, you think that they deserve that because of their birth stage. How do you demonstrate that this is what they actually deserve? And by the way, even if the cosmos thought that this is what they deserved, wouldn't it be better for you to say, you know what, I don't think you deserve that, and help them out? Wouldn't you then be a better person for doing that? And wouldn't they be better off as well? That's all convenient if you start with karma. Oh, there needs to be this sense of justice. I think there's a sense of justice. And it starts from ideas of seeing, you know what, you teased that person over there and I saw you tripped and fell. Ha, 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 that's the cosmos getting back to you. It's an appealing idea based on what we see, but that doesn't mean that there's actually something out in the cosmos guaranteeing that we're all going to get what we deserve. And the other thing it tells you is that however bad your life is right now, you deserve that. This is because of something you did earlier in your life or in some other life that you don't have any memory of or control of. You're now screwed and you deserve it. You're a terrible human being. It's not any better than within Christianity when somebody would say that you are so bad I had to kill myself to serve as a sacrifice to myself to make up for how bad you are so that I could love you. So I just couldn't forgive you without killing myself first. Oh, we've got body thetans. We are the result of nuclear bombs being dropped to kill people in volcanoes, and the body thetans have been glomming onto us forever. And how did you determine that? You've got a little meter. How did you determine that that's what the meter is actually testing, is actually registering? What is the methodology behind that? I mean, it's really interesting. If this were true, that we have these invaders, clinging onto our body, and we've all been brainwashed, flown here on B-52s and whatever other weird crap is in Scientology. If you weren't familiar with it, that's where we're going there. But asking those questions and not just assuming what people believe is the important start to all of this. So if I'm about to address a religion that I know nothing about, there's a lot of things that I think about. Is there a God in this religion? What are the fundamental tenets of this religion? And if I don't know, I can ask the person I'm talking to. I don't have to walk into every discussion as an expert. As a matter of fact, some people would say I don't walk into any discussion as an expert. Fortunately, I think they're wrong on a couple things. But if, for example, their religion is based on ancient writings, or perhaps even new writings, if you're a Scientologist or a Mormon, what do you know about those writings? Where did they come from? Is there any good reason why we should pay attention to them? Do I need to read these? Do I need to become an expert on their holy book before I can even begin to address their religion? Maybe. Maybe not. It might actually help. By the way, the more you know, the generally more helpful it's going to be. So if you have actually studied, you're going to be in a better position, provided you don't let your advanced knowledge of their religion keep you from actually concentrating on what their claim is. Because you can know all you want about version X of Christianity, but if you're arguing against version Y, they get to dismiss you again. They shouldn't, but they will. So it's not necessary to necessarily be an expert in their holy book, but it might help. It might also backfire. What version of their holy book do you need to read? My goodness, is it the NASB, the NIV, the King James Version, the modern English version, the Good News Bible? Does it only work if I read the Quran in the original language, or is translations okay? If translations are okay, which translations are okay? How do I know I have the original version? Why do I have to go learn dead languages? Why did I have to learn Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek in order to be able to understand this correctly? What kind of God is putting me in a position where I have to become experts in dead languages in order to understand it correctly? Is this a big colossal game of hide and go seek, where only a handful of people who spend their entire lives studying archaeology and ancient history might be able to piece together something that might make sense? That doesn't make any sense to me. If you don't know what version you're supposed to read, oh yes, I've read your Bible, I've read all of it. I had a guy call into the show last week who was irritated that I didn't like the Bible. Turns out he'd never read it. He'd read parts of it, but not the whole thing. He didn't know that the Bible supported slavery. He didn't know that the Bible required a rapist to marry the woman that he raped and never divorce her. He didn't know any of that stuff. He just knew what he learned in Sunday school. And that's one of the keys, is that many of them don't know. Many of them don't know their own religion, even outside of Christianity. But they probably know more than you do if you haven't bothered to look into it at all. So when it comes to their holy book, what do? You ask them. Is it your position that in order for me to get any sort of understanding of your religion, that I must first read and study your holy book? And if so, which version? And if so, why is that the case? Why is it that you can't simply explain this to me in a way that I understand? Do I have to study under this particular teacher? Do I have to go to these particular extra-biblical or extra-Quranic sources in order to... The Quran wasn't sufficient, now I have to go read the writings over here. The Torah and the Talmud wasn't sufficient, I have to go read these particular rabbis' opinions over here in order to be able to understand this. And then you get to ask the thing that we were just talking about, which is, why should I have to do this? Does this make any sense? Why would a God work this way? Because when I was a believer, God was evident and obvious. Everybody believed. You hear people talk about, look at the trees. I was like that. Look at the trees, it's obvious. So ask the questions to look for similarities to things that you already understand, but don't merely equate them. Don't hear them say something and say, oh, okay, I get it now. You're just like this other religion, only with this substituted, because you lost them right there. You can talk about similarities, and that's a good thing, because if they're counting on their holy book for their religion, and another religion is counting on their holy book, and they're telling you that they have the right one, and they expect you to read and understand theirs in the same way that they do, and the other religion is saying the same thing, have these two spent any time investigating those other religions in the same sense? How did they rule out that other one? Isn't it bizarre that people tend to buy into the religion that they've been most familiar with, that they were perhaps raised with, indoctrinated with, or that they were converted to as a process of investigating this one the most? How many religions have you studied? How many religions do you need to study? What if the right religion is one that doesn't even exist yet? Ooh. Maybe you're the one to look at all these other religions and actually discover a true religion and write that book. Although, I don't know that writing the book is necessarily the best thing to do. They have a claim. They have something that they believe, and you do not. The burden of proof is on them to demonstrate this. And while it is incredibly useful for you to study and become an expert in as much as you can, it's not required to have the conversation. You don't have to be an expert on the religion. It can help. The general arguments that you're going to hear are going to apply to many different religions. So knowing what's wrong, what's fallacious about a particular argument will at least help you find the things that are fallacious in similar arguments. Although don't just assume that because two arguments sound similar that they suffer from the same flaw. There's a lot of effort involved in learning logical fallacies, in learning the structure of arguments, and being able to spot them. And it's more difficult the further removed you are from a structured syllogism and the closer you are to everyday conversations. It gets harder and harder to spot them because now we have much more emotion and propaganda and fuzzy language. And well, that's not quite what I meant. What I meant was this. And that's why constructing a syllogism is probably one of the best ways to actually analyze a claim. The limitations of scientific inquiry apply to every religion that makes claims about the supernatural. Not all of them do. I don't think Scientology necessarily makes truly supernatural claims, perhaps some paranormal. It's bullshit, but it's a fun bullshit. Until people start getting hurt from it, until families are destroyed, until people are beaten or cajoled or locked in rooms and starved to death because they won't comply, and that happens even within some of the fun religions from the outside. Science is blocked from investigating and confirming the existence of the supernatural or the ability of the supernatural to have any sort of impact on nature. We simply don't have a mechanism. It's not an assertion. Science doesn't say, we have the truth and the supernatural does not exist. Science says, we're not making proclamations about truth, we're creating models based on all the available evidence, and until somebody gives us a pathway to investigate and confirm the supernatural, we don't get to include that. We're not telling you the supernatural's not existent, we're just saying it hasn't been confirmed to be real, and until it has, we can't address it. And every religion that appeals to the supernatural is going to be blocked by that, no matter what argument they make. As a matter of fact, all this time that I've spent debating specific points of doctrine or the Kalam cosmological argument or anything else could have all been saved by pointing out, how did you demonstrate that the supernatural is real or it interacts with reality in any way? It's buying into this idea of substance dualism, that there is the material world and then there is some non-material world that we never demonstrate, that is the foundation of supernaturalism, whether it takes the form of Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or anything that makes this appeal to the supernatural. When you're dealing with the natural religions, which tend to be ideas about worshiping nature in some respect or worshiping a fictional manifestation about nature, like, boy, karma seems kind of nice, or crystal vibrations or whatever else. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I suppose, I'm not aware of any religions that fall into that category that are playing the join us or die card that many of the supernatural religions are playing, nor am I aware of any of those natural religions that have any sufficient power base such that they are attempting to legislate their beliefs onto everybody else. I don't think I'm going to be required to buy tarot cards anytime soon. I already own some, so I'm safe if that happens. But I'll be able to point out why I don't accept that as well. Beliefs matter, and people believe things. They really do. Some of them really believe in a talking snake. Some of them think it was metaphorical, but they want the story at the foundation of that. Beliefs matter. And I'm not going to derail this into a discussion about belief and knowledge. I can do that another time. But these people believe something, and they are asking you to believe it as well, in many cases. And if they're not coming to you to ask you to believe it, it is still worthwhile to question them about why they believe it, because they are acting on behalf of these beliefs. Or if they believe in belief and are just acting as if they believe, they're now acting on behalf of acting like they believe, and it still matters. You're asking them what they believe and why. It's the key question that we try to ask at the Atheist Experience, and the why is the most important point. And more important than why they believe is why they think anyone else should believe. And that's where they end up adopting a burden of proof. They have to be pushed and questioned on this. And the best methods that I've found are to use the Socratic method of asking questions, because you're never going to learn something as strongly as when you have that aha moment where you realized something yourself. And so you can use that methodology to do that. You may need some expertise in their religion to be able to look at them and say, you're wrong and here's why. I hope you have massive expertise in their religion and the subjects surrounding it before you ever look at someone and say, you're wrong and here's why. Because if you fail to demonstrate that, you've reinforced their beliefs in their head. It shouldn't reinforce anybody's beliefs, but it will. But you only need reason and curiosity in order to say, I don't believe you, convince me. And when they expect you to become an expert, you should then ask them why do I need to become an expert? Why is it insufficient for us just to have this conversation? What about this is so complicated that you can't just explain it to me? Because you're looking at a book that explained it to you, or you're looking at people who explained it to you, and they had explained by somebody, and so on and so on. So why can't, is there someone else I could talk to who could maybe explain this better? And if you become an expert, then you can begin to address the why, and you should become an expert on their particular doctrines and how much thought they have put into this. Nothing is more satisfying on the TV show than when somebody calls in who knows far less about their religion than I do. And I try not to be a dick about it. I don't always succeed, but I try not to. And the reason that I try not to is because I think that ridiculous ideas are deserving of ridicule, but I don't think that people are deserving of ridicule for believing ridiculous things. And if I thought they were stupid or incapable of changing their mind, I clearly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, because that would be an exercise in like masochism. I'm never going to change your mind, but boy, I'm sure going to talk at you as if it were possible. The truth is, we can change minds. We do change minds. I have thousands of emails from people whose minds have been changed because of what's happened on the show and the debates. I think it's important. At most events, I'll have people raise their hands if they used to be religious, and then you look around the room. You can do it. Anybody used to be religious? Yes? Yeah. I think we were worth talking to paraphrase my friend Keith Lowell Jensen. Going into these conversations, thank you, Vent. Going into these conversations with the right mindset is important, and not everybody has the patience or the desire to do that, and that's fine. There's plenty of room in a broad movement for people who don't ever want to have an argument with somebody who's a believer. They don't ever want to engage on that. They don't want to have to read their holy book. They don't want to have to spend all their time pointing out fallacies, dancing around things, playing word games. Ask, how do you know that? How do you know that you know? You could be a brain in a vat. The type of debates that I have with Cy and stuff drive people mad. You don't have to be doing that. And if that's not in your character, that's fine. The best thing you can do for the movement in general is to be an out, open secularist. Because that way, when they meet somebody who they like, and then they find out, hey, this person's a godless heathen. I was supposed to be terrified of them. They're trying to destroy America and kill babies and burn the world apart and hail Satan. Now their view of who we are has changed. Not every conversation has to be an argument. Well, yes, it does, because that's how I live my life. So isn't that how all of you should live your life? Isn't it my job to tell you that you need to be just like me and let's argue all the time? But it doesn't matter whether you're arguing a Christian religion or a non-Christian religion. The core of it is all involved in, do they have good reasons that can convince you? And if their answers are, well, you need to go read this version of this book and talk to this expert, that's interesting. I appreciate the fact that maybe there's some effort involved there. But I still don't understand why I should take that step, and I still don't understand why you think that step should be necessary. And what is wrong with someone like me who may not be willing to take that step? Does the God concept make sense? Does the foundation of their religion make sense, given what we know about reality and who we are as human beings? Is there going to be one more bang? Anyway, thanks. We'll do questions. Good noises.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.